In a game where few thought it possible, one player dared to dream.
They've only gone and done Submarines, haven't they? Blooming Submarines.
Wargaming announced this week that the Halloween event, which is always good fun, will include Submarines. And we're not talking a cosmetic skin over the extant game like Space Battles, oh no, we're talking a fully fledged new style of gameplay, complete with new mechanics and underwater camera angles. I should confess before I go on that I am a huge fan of Submarines in general. Submarine films, Submarine games, Submarine stories, I love it. Wargaming has been saying until this week that they would never ever be doing Submarines, so I'd never really hoped that it would happen, but they've actually done it, and I'm so excited to try it out because from this teaser trailer it looks fantastic. A quick shout out to the Wargaming sound team. The music on this trailer is superb. The bit where the submarine dives at the beginning gave me goosebumps. It's worth mentioning the scope of this gameplay teaser before I get into the details. The submarine gameplay that's shown in this teaser is for the Halloween event only at this point, so you won't see submarines in the main game anytime soon, and possibly never. Wargaming are using this Halloween event to test the water with submarine gameplay, as they've done with testing other mechanics in the past with the Halloween events, and if it's a hit with the player base, they'll look at the feasibility of putting it into the main game. If it's unpopular, they'll probably shelve it. I'll talk towards the end of the video about some of the challenges submarines would pose to game designers, but for now let's just talk about what you'll actually see in the Halloween event, which presumably will be in the patch after 079, which will probably be 080. So everything I'm talking about now, until I say otherwise, is for the Halloween event only. I'll discuss bringing these ships into the main game at the end. So in the Halloween event, there will be several different subs you can play, and only in the Operation game mode. 3 subs are shown in the teaser. Krocha, which I think means crash in Russian, Gefalcon, which means Jaya Falcon, which is a bird of prey in German, and Seelöwe, which means sea lion in German. And they seem to have different armaments, and presumably they have different handling characteristics. On the reveal stream, Sub Octavian mentioned that because the only real weapon a sub has is torpedoes, that the designers really focused on that aspect of the gameplay. Subs will be able to carry different types of torpedoes. Loading is done 1 tube at a time, and they want players to experience 3 emotions as they play. Firstly, anticipation, as the player stalks their prey. Secondly, fear, as they risk being detected and attacked because subs are very fragile. And finally, satisfaction for a well-executed strike. Diving and depth control is semi-automatic. There are 3 preset depths: surfaced, periscope depth and submerged, and you change between them using the Q and E keys by default. When surfaced, you have a destroyer-like detection radius and your torps are inaccurate. At periscope depth, your detection drops significantly and your torps become more accurate. Submerged, you cannot fire your torpedoes and are undetectable except by sonar and by the assured detection distance of 2 kilometers without the acquisition module, which presumably won't exist in the operation. Something I don't know, which I would like to, is whether the detection radii are spheres or whether they are cylinders. So is depth irrelevant to distance from target? We simply don't know. Diving time is limited by an oxygen meter which gradually goes down when you submerge. It seems to last something like 1 or 2 minutes. When you come up to periscope depth or you surface, your oxygen supply replenishes quite quickly by the looks of it. It's not clear what happens when you run out of oxygen, but I think it's a fair bet that you start to take damage rather than being immediately destroyed. Torpedoes can be fired 1 at a time directly forward or aft, and so you have to turn the boat to aim, and the aiming guide seems the same as for surface ships. Depth charges have been implemented and are fired from shore installations and destroyers in the operation. It's unclear how dangerous they are, but I hope they do more damage the closer you are to them. That'd be a nice mechanic, but again, we don't know if that's true. The visuals look stunning, as is usual for the Halloween events. The boats have the gorgeous steampunk look to them, and the underwater world looks intriguing. I can't wait to have a close-up look at that monster fish, who I have named Steve. One last thing before I discuss the future of subs, there seems to be a new icon for the submarine ship class. You might have seen it earlier at the top of the screen. It's a sort of dorsal fin-like icon, which I quite like. Right, that's all we know about the Halloween gameplay until the PTS version is released, probably in a couple of weeks. So on to a little bit of discussion about what submarines might mean for the game if they were introduced alongside other ship classes. I don't want to talk about every single aspect I can think of because that will go on for hours, so here are my top 3 areas for consideration in reverse order. Third most important is, how do you kill a submarine? It's obvious to me that a surface sub is going to be quite vulnerable. They'll probably be quite slow, they have little armor, they may have a citadel. And so while the detection may be destroyer-like, being surface spotted will probably be terminal for a submarine. Being fully submerged, they likely won't be able to do much in the way of spotting, and they probably won't be able to use their torpedoes. So that's not really an issue either, especially as the oxygen mechanic means they can't stay under for long anyway. The part that concerns me is when they're at periscope depth. What's the downside to that? Their detection will decrease to maybe 2 or 3 kilometers. Presumably they will be harder to hit or damage because the body of the ship is under the water and shells don't easily penetrate water. If they retain the same spotting range as surface ships when they use their periscope, that could pose a real problem, far more of a problem than the radar meta at the moment, because you would have a ship class which is very difficult to detect but can keep you spotted permanently with ease, and that simply can't happen. It would destroy the game, and so Wargaming will have to find a solution to that problem. My suggestion here would be that submarine spotting when at periscope depth or submerged should be limited to the submarine itself. No information should be passed along to teammates, because this would simulate the difficulty of using radio underwater and would solve this perma-spotting problem. I also think that hydroacoustic search could be modified for interaction with submarines. Perhaps an extra range ring could be added to the sonar for the detection of submarines, and only submarines, so that it behaves like radar as far as the subs are concerned. I also think it would be a good idea if ships equipped with the sonar consumable had a passive ability to detect the direction of subs within a certain range, even when the sonar is on cooldown, sort of a sub-specific radio location. This would reflect the fact that hydro-carrying ships are likely to be suitable for sub-hunting. Having played games like Silent Hunter, I also think that submarines which are submerged should potentially lose all surface spotting and get some kind of radiolocation-like ability, simply to know which direction ships are in and maybe approximate range, not exact location until they come back up to periscope depth or to surface. This will add an element of skill in that sub-players will have to anticipate surface ship movements, and good anticipation will be rewarded with the ability to launch a good strike, whereas bad anticipation will potentially result in popping up right next to an enemy. My second most important area for consideration is the impact on other ship classes. You might initially be concerned for battleships, since subs' main targets will be battleships. The introduction of subs would likely encourage battleship players to be more cautious, unless the meta becomes that subs are able to get behind enemy lines, in which case it might actually encourage more active play from the battleships. Cruisers, being more nimble and likely to be carrying hydro, are the least likely to be adversely affected, and will actually have an extra dimension added to their role in that they will then be responsible for battleship protection, anti-submarine operations. I think the likely victims, if submarines are introduced, are the poor little destroyers. Submarines and destroyers, especially stealthy IJNDDs like Kagero, Shimakaze, will share the same niche, the same role of hunter-killer, potentially of spotter. What happens if you take 2 different beings and force them to perform the same role in the same environment? Evolution by natural selection. Whichever class is better at this role will be the one which everyone wants to play, and the other will likely fade in popularity. This conflict could see destroyer gameplay change significantly as people favour the gunboat and fast HE spammer type destroyers over stealthy torping ships. There are many nuances to this interaction, but balancing destroyers against subs will be a very difficult task. My number one area of concern, which you've probably guessed already, is detection and spotting. Detection will be the make or break mechanic for submarine gameplay integrating successfully into the rest of the game. Make subs too effective at spotting and too hard to spot, and you've introduced effectively permanent mobile radar. Make them too weak at spotting, and their scope for variety of play and usefulness in competitive gameplay will be limited, and they're really not going to be that popular. This balancing act of detecting subs versus what they can detect will be the single most important issue the designers have to consider. My advice though, stats folk, at the moment is don't worry about all this stuff. It's a long way off potentially being put into the game, so for now just simply enjoy the Halloween event and be sure to let the community know what you think, because Wargaming do listen to the player base very carefully. If you like what you see, say so, because content people tend to stay quiet, annoyed people tend to make all the noise. So if after trying the Halloween event you want to see more submarine gameplay, let people know. Thanks for listening, Statsfolk. Please do subscribe and enable notifications if you'd like to see more Foghorn. And please do join us in Discord to continue this debate about submarines. The link is in the description. Take care of each other, and I'll speak to you soon.